Let's go ahead and get started. So African People and Wildlife implements holistic conservation programming. And one of the ways that we foster coexistence is by really working with communities for community-led and community-driven conservation, empowering communities to collect the data that they need to best manage their natural resources. So this kind of high-level framework is applicable across any landscape. So while the grasslands of the American West and the rangelands of East Africa may seem like a world apart, there's actually a lot of similarities and lessons that can be learned by sharing what's working and what's not working across different social and ecological contexts. For example, we work with Maasai pastoralists to help protect their livestock against predation from big cats, lions, leopards, cheetahs, while as conservationists in the American West are working with ranchers to help prevent predation by wolves and grizzly bears. We also work to help manage and restore habitat. Invasive species or problematic species are becoming an issue as climate change brings more and more of these species into the grassland system. So we work to remove invasive species to ensure that pasture land remains open for grazing for not only cattle, but also the wildlife species that graze among them, whether it be zebra or elk. And we also work with communities to help develop and manage grazing plans. So that kind of collective resource management that might be akin to rotational grazing that you see in the West. So it's really amazing to have this opportunity for a knowledge exchange, and we're very grateful to Conservation Nation for facilitating that. My colleague Yamat had the opportunity to travel to Yellowstone and be embedded with the wolf team there. And then Taylor will come to Tanzania this fall and be embedded with our human wildlife coexistence team. And then not only is Conservation Nation supporting the fellowship and the exchange, they also are supporting direct conservation on the ground in the form of supporting our human elephant coexistence work in the Ngorongoro Conservation Area Authority. So we're super pleased to be partnering with them on all of these fronts. And with that, I'd like to introduce the CEO of Conservation Nation, Lynn Minto, and then we will get into our program. So Lynn.
Thank you so much, Molly. I'm excited and proud to be here and to be supporting African people and wildlife and to be here with so many friends. So I run Conservation Nation, as Molly just said, and we are an organization that is dedicated to saving wildlife by lifting barriers to allow for more inclusive, representative, and therefore much stronger community of wildlife conservationists and little wildlife champions. So we do that by funding amazing conservationists, giving folks an equitable leg up, and then through an education program that's designed to inspire children from underserved communities to see themselves as wildlife champions and belonging in nature and in this fight. So I'm here with a bunch of friends, which is so fantastic. So Taylor was our very first inaugural fellow. So Taylor is amazing. Excited to see what she has to say. Yamat, thanks to our friends at Catmosphere, is our second fellow. So this will be fantastic. And then Marsha Marsh is a board member of Conservation Nation and a friend. And so Marsha was the COO of WWF, so brings a tremendous amount of experience and wisdom to all of this, including to this discussion tonight. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Marsha.
It's great. Thanks, Lynn. Thanks, Molly, and everyone else for this. This is it's a great opportunity to hear from two very exciting people and conservationists. I love the fellows program that we have. I love the idea of the exchange. So I think this is going to spark some really good inspiration for many of you that are working out there. I loved working around this issue at WWF, whether it was the exchange of some of the tribal leaders and ranchers from the Northern Great Plains into Namibia. Some of our team members from Nepal came to see what was happening in Tanzania, along the coastline in Mozambique. Every time you had a chance to walk in someone else's shoes, people came back with sort of a burst of energy and a new perspective on things. So I love the fact that we're able to do this with these two conservation fellows and look forward to hearing more from them today. We're going to let each of them introduce themselves, but in the way of a small presentation. So Yamat, would you like to take it away?
Yeah, thank you. And hi, everyone. So my name is Yamat Lengai. I am from Lobosoit, Manyara, Tanzania. I born and raised in a village bordering Tanzania National Park. This is the area that wildlife and people interact. And as pastoralists, we depend on livestock. We rely on for everything, for food, and it's our bank. And you just imagine that the area where people and wildlife interact, cattle and livestock are there. It doesn't mean that there is no conflict. There is a conflict because of the livestock killed by carnivores, and it's a bad thing to pastoralists like Maasai. And the Maasai people live with wildlife and they don't hate wildlife at all, but we interact. The only thing that causes the conflict is the carnivores killing livestock. And as I say that, we depend on livestock in these areas where the herders, the pastoral herders head their livestock. And these are the areas also where wildlife live. So we share the resources, the grasses and everything in the same land. As pastoralists, like me, I grew while fearing lion. I didn't like lion because of the thing that the lion kills livestock at night. So I hated lion. But when I started working with African people and wildlife, I came to realize that lions are also looking for food. It's just they're looking for food, nothing more. But to some perspective from other culture, and I can talk about outside of Tanzania or other people from outside of the area that I work, they fear lion and they hate totally. Like when I was at school doing my, I was at school, people were like, what, where are you living in the areas where there is lions, there is cheetahs, can't you afraid of living with them? And they call these areas are the bushes. They call it bush, but I told them it's not the bush, it's our home. We live and we, yeah, it's our home. We live alongside with the wildlife. Us, we believe in coexistence because living with wildlife and protecting them, we don't kill like other people do. We do have some hunters from outside or even of Tanzania coming there to hunt wildlife and to do kind of like business. But the pastoralists, the Maasai people, they don't do that. That's why I used to call myself conservationist by nature. And the background of Maasai, like people, they say that Maasai sometimes they were killing lions, but it's not just because they needed to do that, but you can just imagine that someone is coming to steal from your bank. What can you do about that? So we have cultural and social factors that influences the conflict. And during our fellowship exchange, I was able to learn the cultural differences from where I was born. Like I say that we don't hate living with wildlife. With our organization and other organizations which work with conservation activities, I can say the previous years, the communities were neglected, that the people did not think about the communities live alongside with wildlife. But with some organizations like African People and Wildlife, came and sit with the communities and trying to figure out and use the local knowledge on how to prevent the conflict that's occurring in those areas. And we came with the solution of, we used the local knowledge. You can see the picture there, that is the boma. We call it a living wall. It's a crows which livestock live in, and it is attached with the chain link. It's the trees planted and attached with the chain link, and that can prevent the livestock from attack by carnivores. And it has proven from our data that are collected alongside all the landscape that we walk, it has proven that the boma can protect livestock inside about 99% walk. Yeah, so we have seen from our data that we collect. And also with this living wall, it's a win-win solution because the trees are planted, so it's good for environment, and also the people are benefiting because the livestock now are safe, and also the people are tolerating the wildlife. So I can say that the win-win solution for both, for the environment, people, and wildlife. And the next slide. One of the work that I do is to do education and awareness. That's just a picture of me with young herders, and we call like guananis, but they are the elders from the Maasai community. We came together and sit and trying to find a solution on how to prevent the conflict in the pasture. Able to prevent the conflict in the boma, that the livestock now are safe at the boma, but how can we prevent the conflict during the pasture when the livestock are outside of the boma? So that's one of the work that I do. Another work that I do is I conduct and design surveys and other data collection tools. I also analyze the community source data related to human and wildlife conflict and sustainable rangeland management. I also have now developed being an expert of using GIS, as now I'm here in San Diego participating in the GIS conference, and tomorrow I'll be presenting the work of the tools that we use in conservation, the tools that we use, the GIS tools that I use in my work in our organization. With the fellowship exchange that I went, it was a great thing to me because I was able to go outside of Tanzania and learn and get some experience of conservation outside of where I was born. And I learned a lot of things there. I was able also to learn how to use the technologies like the bioacoustic device, radio telemetries, and thank you to Taylor and her team that I was able to do the pop counts and wildlife wolf monitoring, and learn a lot of work in the work that they are doing in the Yellowstone National Park. And I was also able to meet some friends, a lot of friends, good one. It was my pleasure to meet them and learn from them. And also, I was able also to share the work I do in Tanzania to the Yellowstone wolf project team. And also I was able to to see some beautiful things that I've never touched, like the snow. I've never touched the snow, so it's my first time. And also I went to beautiful places like the Grand Prismatic. It was a cool place to me. And it's just experience to me to learn conservation outside of Tanzania and see what the other people see and what they do about conservation works. So thank you.
That's great. And what beautiful slides and wonderful experience. So why don't we, without further ado, we'll turn it over to Taylor Rabe to hear Taylor's perspective. And then we'll come back to talk more about what your fellowship mean, coexistence, conflict, what your context is, so people can really feel like they've walked in your shoes virtually. So Taylor, take it away.
Hi, everyone. My name is Taylor Rabe, and I am a biological science technician with the Yellowstone Wolf, Cougar, and Elk projects. I've been working full-time now for the park for almost 3 years, and I will shout Conservation Nation's name from the rooftops because they really have been my biggest cheerleaders and have supported me every step of the way. They made me their first fellow in 2022. And they also helped fund my very first full-time paying field job with the Wolf Project. I work very closely with Lynn and Trisha, and they are my biggest supporters, and I am extremely grateful for them and the opportunities that they've given me. So I have traveled all over the world doing conservation work in different parts of the globe, I guess. I did my first study abroad in Kruger National Park, where we got to interact with the local communities, doing work with the school groups. We got to do a bunch of different non-invasive work. We did some big game capture, which you can see in the middle photo there, capturing a Cape buffalo. And I think that's really what kind of piqued my interest in working in the conservation field. And I just wanted to continue to help educate and inspire future generations. This is just a little bit of a kind of visualization of what I do in the park. As a technician, I do road monitoring, so I will monitor the different radio-collared wolves. I do a lot of management of wolves, helping make sure they stay fearful of people, helping make sure visitors stay safe. I do research on the gray wolves, and I also do education, which is arguably the most important part of my job. Something that's really exciting that we just started is the new bioacoustics program called the Cry Wolf Project. And we are putting out these different autonomous recording units, or ARUs, all across the northern range of Yellowstone, capturing different wolf vocalizations. And so this is what it might sound like. This is a big chorus howl. You can hear the puppies come in. So this is going to go on for quite a while, so we can stop it there. But just to give you guys an idea of kind of the work that we're doing, it's really exciting, cutting edge work. Fortunately, Conservation Nation is helping fund this work that we're doing, helping buy these ARU devices. And the goal is to be able to use wolf vocalizations to potentially count abundance, number of wolves in the park at any given time. Can we recognize individual wolves or packs based on howling signatures? So there's a lot of different things we're trying to learn, but it's just kind of in the beginning stages. And as Yamat kind of touched on a little bit, we did host our very first fellowship exchange. And so Yamat got to come here and spend about 2 weeks with me and my team in Yellowstone. We got to do a ton of good stuff. It's fun to be able to show someone a place that you live and that you adore, and to kind of see them experience that for the very first time. And it had to make me laugh because she loved the thermal features, and you couldn't pay me to spend a day down in the interior of the park. So it was fun to just be able to help show her these things and have her be able to work with our team.
Great. That was really super introduction to both of you. And I thought before we go too far into sort of the science of what we're doing, it'd be great to pause for a moment on the fellowship program. So Taylor, you've had a little more experience. I'm interested, you're still, both of you, so young relative to me in your conservation careers. What has the fellowship program meant so far in terms of, your own career trajectory? And maybe are there certain lessons or things that you've had that have come from it that, have been particularly meaningful to you? And then Yamat, you're still early on, but I'm going to move to you with the same question.
I think for me personally, it's been so awesome to get to kind of share and bounce ideas off of Yamat. This is my very first field job. And so kind of being thrown in and working with such a controversial, polarizing species, it's interesting to kind of get different perspectives on how management is done in different parts of the world. And so just trying to implement some of the things that they do in Tanzania with African people and wildlife, and how could that kind of transfer into the work that we're doing, just to kind of help coexistence be a little bit more smooth and fluid. Because I think that's something that we're still dealing with here in the West, is trying to just exist amongst predators right now. And so hearing kind of the different cultural feelings and ideologies towards predators and the things that they're dealing with in Africa, super insightful. And I think that that's been the most rewarding part for me, is just to hear her ideas, kind of the things that she thinks about the way management is done here versus where she's at.
Yeah. To me, first of all, I can say that Conservation Nation, I received the grant, and I had a freedom to choose what I can do with it. And then I work with African people and wildlife, but I had some freedom of where to add more values on my work. So it was one of the work that I was able to go and bring the elders and the young headers to learn from elders. And also another thing is I got a lot of experience, especially moving outside of Tanzania, outside of the pastoralist, and learn other culture on the perspective of the wildlife, like in the Yellowstone. And I was able also to visit, I visited the ranch, the community ranch in Yellowstone National Park. So it was a big experience to me.
That's great. I really appreciate the fact that you touched upon the fact that the grants allow you to do some things that you need to do for your own growth, and are not necessarily just program funding, because I've worked a lot in program funding, but you had a chance to pick what really feeds you. So fabulous. I'm glad that that's been part of it. Each of you mentioned coexistence. And when we met each other earlier virtually, we talked about, well, what does that really mean? It means something different in Bhutan, with deeply felt Buddhist beliefs with respect to wildlife, or with some of the tribal communities out in the Northern Great Plains and other things. And we had a nice conversation about it means so many different things depending upon what community you're part of. So Yamat, could I ask you to speak to what does coexistence mean within the Maasai community? So give us a sense of that.
Yeah, the coexistence means the people living along with the wildlife. And that thing is, it's not new to us. Like the Maasai communities, we coexist. We live with wildlife. If you have, I think you said that you have been in Tanzania, you can go just to the part where you can find the livestock, the headers grazing the livestock alongside. You can see the giraffe at the same time, and the cattle and goats with zebra. And it's not just and you can see the headers around there. So the coexistence, and I used to call myself that we are the pastoralists, we are the conservationists. It's not a thing that we have learned. No, it's just the thing that we are living in, so that I can that's the definition of how I talk about conservation. Yeah.
That's great.
I talk about coexistence. Yeah.
Yeah, and it means something so profoundly different from the Maasai than perhaps Taylor the ranchers or other communities out there. What does coexistence mean within that Yosemite environment or Yellowstone environment?
Yeah, you know, Yamat talks about how it's just kind of their way of life to be able to coexist amongst these other animals. Out here, you know, depending on who you're talking to and who you're working with, it's a struggle to just get people to want to allow predators to just simply be in the same space as us or as their livestock. Yamat mentioned the ranch that we visited during her Yellowstone exchange. The Tom Miner Basin Association, just about 30 miles outside of Yellowstone, they do a really good job of coexisting with grizzly bears specifically in that ranching community. So I do recommend everyone check them out to kind of get an idea of what they're doing. But I think it is so interesting how, specifically for me, because education is such a big part of my job, I'm trying to figure out how to navigate kind of dealing with these different groups, whether they're super anti-wolf or super pro-wolf or ranching communities, just being able to engage them and providing them with factual, non-biased, scientific information to kind of be able to make their own decisions. And I think at this point, just being able to simply exist with these predators, especially out west, is kind of the goal.
Okay, that sounds great. So we talked about coexistence. We also talked about conflict, and I've seen and heard the experience of conflict, whether it's personal safety or, you know, food. I've sat on top of a hilltop in Mozambique and watched elephants out there picking up the roof off a house and the house and sort of turning it over like a tinker toy and trampling through all the crops in the community, much less sort of the physical peril that the people might feel. So you can understand the absolute survival part of it. Can you talk a bit about what conflict looks like in your environment and maybe how each of your organizations has worked to mitigate that conflict? And you gave us a few examples early on, Yamat. Could you speak more to that?
Yeah, so the conflicts, and as African people and wildlife, we do have the local people, local communities who does that job to collect data. So we design the forms and the applications for data collection, and we receive like every day the data collection of the conflicts, livestock killed by carnivores, like every day, and it's a bad thing that, and sometimes the local people feels bad, but the thing is, the carnivores are just looking for food, and I can say that. But with the conflicts and the organization like African People and Wildlife, who used the local knowledge, like, and put some scientific ways of building the living walls that is now protecting livestock in the boma from killed by carnivores. It has bring some hope, like, to the communities, because there is now, I can see there is a tolerance to and we have done some evaluation on how people are now relating on the carnivores with the people who have the living walls. But the only thing that's now we need to work more on that is to solve the conflict during the pasture. And I have saying that, I have talked about that. Now we want to do more education, like, because nowadays I think it's just this, some people, some cultures or Maasai people are forgetting that they have they passed the livestock head by the Morani, like the warriors, and nowadays they're allowing small children to go to head, and the lions and other carnivores, they don't fear the small kids. So the kids can head and then the lion can just pass and attack cattle at the other side. So by giving them and making them to remember that the kids are not supposed to head, the warriors are the one who have to head the livestock and not the kids. So it's the thing that we have to sit with the communities and make them to remember and remember and remember, and trying to avoid the carnivores, because I can see that people have more knowledgeable than the carnivores, so we can find a way to avoid them. And with the use of the living wall, I have given the percentage of like about 99%, the living wall work effectively. Yeah.
It's interesting. I mean, I think it sounds positively terrifying to be out herding, but I understand that finding ways to do that. Are there insurance programs that you've had, like small insurance programs for the loss of livestock? I know we had some of that in Namibia and other places.
Yeah, so the thing in Tanzania, we don't have that. And the people who lost their livestock, they are not given anything. They don't receive anything. Just when you are if your livestock are if the livestock are being killed, no anything that you get from. Yeah.
Is there any compensation via tourism or anything else and other livelihoods that no? Oh, okay.
No.
You have a tough job. How about you, Taylor?
Yeah, something that Yamat and I touched on a lot while she was here is just kind of exploring the different attitudes that people have towards predators. And as she talks about, you know, the people in Tanzania who are dealing with daily livestock depredations still have an appreciation and admiration for the predators, and knowing that they're doing this because they're hungry and this is easy food and things like that. That's super different than how it is out here. Livestock depredation and overall human predator conflict is very abnormal. In the West, it's very rare. It doesn't happen super often. But the attitude surrounding it is very, very different. It's a very aggressive attitude. People don't like predators regardless. They might have never even had a negative interaction with predators. And they still just don't want them existing on the landscape. And so I think it really has to do with the cultural differences between kind of the Western culture and then the culture in Africa. And so that's been super fascinating to kind of dissect and think about in a bunch of different ways. I love getting to interact with people who don't necessarily appreciate predators on the landscape. And I love hearing valid reasons as to why. I know that living with predators is extremely difficult, but it can be done through a variety of different ways. And so if someone can give me a valid reason for, you know, why they might not like wolves or grizzly bears, I can empathize with them because I do know that it's difficult. But I also think that a lot of people need to be more open-minded, and it's a lack of education. It really is. I think that if people kind of knew what wolves or bears or things were really about, they might have different opinions and attitudes towards them. You know, the media continues to vilify wolves specifically, right? The Three Little Pigs, Little Red Riding Hood, the new Frozen movie, the wolves are trying to eat them, you know, and that's just not what happens. Wolves are extremely docile, I guess you could say, and very timid and scared of people. They really don't want anything to do with us. And so I think education is key. And I feel like being able to share that knowledge with people from all over the world is extremely important.
So predators have a role in the ecosystem, whether they be wolves or whether they be lions. And I think I've shared with you, Taylor, I know I have, that I had that super romantic view of the reintroduction of wolves from the videos that came out. You bring back some wolves and the rivers will flow and the trees will grow and everything else will happen. And you very quickly pointed out to me that the science may not necessarily demonstrate that that's the case. But I wonder if the two of you could talk about the role of the predators in the ecosystems that you have, and whether that's part of your education outreach to communities.
Yeah, specifically here on Yellowstone, wolves act as kind of the ecosystem engineer. They help shape the way that the landscape functions. They're very vital to the ecosystem. We talked about Marsha a little bit. Like, there's that viral YouTube video called How Wolves Change Rivers. And I just shared in the chat my husband's talk called Do Wolves Really Change Rivers? And he goes a lot more in depth about that, about how, yeah, they are important to the ecosystem and we do need them and they do help Yellowstone function. But there are a lot of different pieces that go into that. And you can't just, I guess you can't just give all of that success to the wolves. But I think it is important. And I think one of the cool things about my job, right, is people care about things that they see. And so getting to show hundreds of visitors wild wolves every single year is exciting because it helps them relate to wild wolves and become more interested and fascinated in what they do and how they impact the overall ecosystem as a whole. And so I think that's super special.
So Yamat, you have lions to deal with. I don't know whether within the Maasai communities are elephants viewed as, I've dealt with a lot of elephant wildlife conflict, whether it be some in Africa and other places. So I'm not sure whether it's the predator language or something else, but talk to me a little bit about how those special beings fit within the ecosystem and how to bring that to the table.
Yeah, so the lions, we call them king of the jungles. That with lion in the ecosystem, they balance the ecosystem because lion is they eat the herbivores and they balance the number of herbivores in the ecosystem. And it's the thing that we talk about when we are doing some educations to the pastoralists, like talking together that the pastoralists can just imagine that the ecosystem or the place without the lions or without the carnivores, it has to be a lot of zebras and other herbivores, and they are going all to finish all the grasses and leave the cows without food. And another animals that balance the ecosystem are the elephants. The elephants tend to eat like many kind of grasses and trees, and then with their what do we call poops, they spread the different kind of grasses and trees, and they regrow from the places where there are no grasses or there are no trees. So that's what I can talk about that.
So do you, I know in my travels around, there was always, I arrived somewhere and there was someone who had been either the #1 poacher in a particular place or a hunter or something, who had some experience with some conservation education or something that helped to transform their perspective. Do either of you have anyone in mind that you'd encountered in your areas that has had some kind of personal transformation about the value of wildlife within the ecosystems in our own lives?
Yeah, I've interacted with a lot of different people who have grown up one way and they've changed with adulthood. One person in particular, he spent some time volunteering with me. He grew up in Paradise Valley, just right outside of Yellowstone. And he grew up hating wolves. And now, 10 years later, his attitude has completely changed. And I think part of it has to do with actually seeing them on the landscape, right? And then educating themselves on kind of what's myth and what's not. One of my favorite types of interactions is watching wolves in Yellowstone, hundreds of people around. And you always get these kind of grumpy old men who seem to be super anti-predator. They talk about wolves have decimated the elk population. They shouldn't exist on the landscape. They hate them. But then they ask if they can see the wolves through my scope. And that is a win. It's not necessarily my job as an educator to change someone's opinions, but rather just provide them with the information to kind of make their own decision. And so if someone who claims to hate wolves wants to watch wolves through my scope, I will always step aside and allow that to happen, because just that event could change the way someone feels. And it's super, super important to share those kind of moments with people.
Yeah, so to me, I give an example of myself. When I was growing, I hated lion totally. I didn't like want to hear about lion. But when I started working with the organization that's do the conservation and protect lions, and then now the lions are my favorite animals. Yeah.
That's great. So, Yamat, I'm sure that as well, a lot of women coming into the conservation field have faced sort of previous sort of macho culture out there. And I'm wondering, in terms of your own career, a woman from the Maasai culture breaking into conservation, you talked about perspective and things like that. I wonder if you might talk about some of the challenges you might have faced just at a personal level, advancing your own career, and how you've dealt with those things.
Yeah, so the only thing that I have seen as a challenge is the mentorship. Because I grew there, and then in Tanzania, we don't have like this kind of mentorship and networking on the conservation work that we do. Yeah, so it was hard for me to learn about conservation because I have seen that conservation was done especially with the white people, and it was hard to just see and how the other Africans or other Tanzanian people see conservation as and learn from them. So I see that was a big challenge to me because I had to struggle and about conservation. And if you see my work, like my education background was about information technology, nothing about conservation. So I had to struggle, learn about wildlife and learn about conservation. And I had anyone to rely on learning those kind of things. Yeah.
That's
so it's a big challenge. Yeah.
One of the whole reasons for Conservation Nation, I'm sure the partnership with African people and wildlife is to create these role models, these particularly exciting young women like yourselves to do that. Taylor, how about you in terms of challenges? We talked a little bit earlier on about the challenges of you getting your career going and finding a way to, find full-time work. But as a young woman in conservation, have there been particular challenges that you've faced?
Yeah, I think first and foremost, I'm very fortunate to work on a team that is extremely diverse. We are 50% women with the project, and so that's encouraging. I think, it goes without saying that growing up, there wasn't many people who looked like Yamat and I, especially women of color in the conservation field. And so I think that was hard trying to find someone to look up to when wanting to go into this field. So it's very rare to see people of color in Yellowstone. I can't think off the top of my head of anyone who actually works in the wildlife division besides me and my coworker Jeremy that is a person of color, and so that's a little bit tough. But I think it makes it all the more sweet when we do get to interact with people who kind of are shocked and gasp, that they're seeing a woman of color doing the work that I'm doing. And I get to show a lot of different school kids, especially this year, a lot of different inner city school kids, kind of the work and how to get involved. And that's been really, really fun to kind of give this next generation an idea that there are people like me who maybe came from the same background as them and got to where I am, and that they can do that too.
That sounds great. That leads to your great role in education. So Molly, I'll pause for a minute. If we have any questions, we'll do that. I still have a couple more, but I didn't want to monopolize the conversation if there's someone out there that has a question for either Yamat or Taylor.
Sure. We have one question about how you might kind of share the information you learned in application on the ground. So Taylor, you talked about these audio devices. How might you envision deploying those, or Yamat, how might you envision using those in Tanzania? And is there anything specifically that you learned from Yamat that you're going to now incorporate into your work in Yellowstone?
Yeah.
So
go ahead, Yamat.
okay. Yeah, so we planned with Taylor that when she comes to Tanzania, she'll come with the bioacoustic device, so we can try to use it in there, although we don't use things like radio telemetry, because we don't color lion or any other wildlife. But with the bioacoustic device, I was so interested and I liked it, the way it works. And when Taylor comes to Tanzania, she will come with it and we will try to use it, see how it works. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm excited to be able to take an ARU to Africa, because obviously the wildlife is incredibly abundant, and it'll be amazing to see, what types of vocalizations we're getting within a 2-week period. So that's really exciting. I'm happy to be able to help implement that. In terms of kind of implementing things that I've learned from Yamat into my work, I talk about the living walls all the time. That is something that I'm incredibly fascinated by, something that gets the community involved, and helps them feel like they're making a change, which is really, really exciting and beneficial. Because I do my work in Yellowstone, I have very little communication with people outside of the park, with involving wolves. We don't really have any type of human wolf negative interactions in Yellowstone. And so I think for me, I put as much information as I can into my presentations that I share. But it's a little bit different, just kind of the system that I work in, and that I don't have as much community involvement.
Okay, we have a follow-up question on what kind of ARUs are you working with?
We use wildlife acoustics. They're called autonomous recording units, and that's what we're using right now. If you want more information, I can actually share a link with you. We're doing a lot of work with Dr. Jeff Reed, and he's kind of the brains behind all of this. So I will share a link in the chat here, which will let you kind of learn a little bit about the work we're doing more in depth.
Okay, great. Now the questions are rolling in. So we have another one. This is for both Yamat and Taylor. What motivated you to choose a conservation career, especially Yamat, with an education background that was not related to conservation or wildlife?
To me, I can say that it was a fate to me. And because I was a conservation by nature, and I went there, I did not know anything about conservation. The only thing that took me there is I needed how to manage database and create databases, and I went there just to deal with data and nothing more. But when I went there, I started developing, loving this kind of it feels like I'm just doing work at home. Yeah, because when I see it's called conservation, but I did not know the word, but we used to do that. So it's something that makes me proud right now, and I love what I'm doing. Yeah.
We welcome tech people with open arms.
Yeah.
All of you data people.
Yeah, and I think for me, I've just always had a big passion for wildlife in general. I did some captive zoo work, which was great. Zoos are important. They help people care about wildlife that they otherwise wouldn't see. But I just found myself kind of gravitating towards wanting to work with wild animals more, and kind of getting to be involved with the research and the field work. And my husband, Jack, does his PhD with the project. And so that's really what got me involved. And there's no better place to work in the wildlife field in the US than here.
Great. Next question. Where do you both see yourselves in 5 years?
These are good questions.
To me, first of all, I was thinking because I want to do my master's degree and I want to do something about wildlife. And I think I'm going to become a greater conservationist and do more for the people, like, because in the culture, the culture that I grew in, now with the organization African People and Wildlife, we do have a program, the youth education program, that's make the younger ones or the kids, the school kids, to go and see and just we have the program that take the kids to the national park to see the wildlife and just to get to know and see the nature which is around them. The program that we didn't, I could not have a chance to visit the national park when I was young. And the thing I have just learned is I didn't not have just a passion of going outside, going into the national park, see the wildlife. And I was thinking, and when I went to the Yellowstone, I asked Taylor that why African people don't have that passion of going into the national parks, watching wildlife. Why? So I was realizing and thought that maybe because we live along with wildlife, so we see that we are just living with them. No need like to go into the national park and see more and watch the wildlife. So I want to help the kids or like the younger ones to get to know and see the importance of not just sitting there and saying that you know the wildlife, but you can explore into different national parks and see the wildlife and learn about how to coexist with wildlife. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think for me in 5 years, that's a big question. Dabbling with the idea of going to get my master's degree, potentially doing something with bioacoustics. I have a lot of different options, but I think generally my passion and my heart lies within sub-Saharan Africa. So I'd like to do something over there. So I'm not entirely sure. That's a loaded question.
They may not let you back out of Tanzania. Yamat may keep you.
I won't complain.
Okay, we have one other question in the chat. What has been your proudest moment thus far in your career?
Yeah, I think for me, a couple years ago now, Lynn and Trisha and the whole Conservation Nation team, they brought me out to DC and I got to interact with some of their school groups there. And there was a little girl at one of the schools who came up to me after my presentation and said, I've always wanted to study chimpanzees and now I can. And that was like such a rewarding moment because it is, you're dealing with these young kids who, don't think that they can follow a career path that involves, I guess, strictly passion. I don't do my job because I make a lot of money. I do it because I love the work that I'm doing and sharing these moments with people. And so that was like, that hit me in the feels for sure. That was super special.
Also,
I was just gonna say, sorry, it sounds like you're both really inspiring the next generation. That's amazing.
yeah. So to me, the pastoralists, because I like talking about that, the kids or the girls, when they finish their primary level, they don't have like options to, if they fail going into the secondary level, they just get married and it's the end. But I wanted to change that and with my video about about Tarangire. The kids now are learning, the school kids are learning, and many of them coming to me like, how did you end up doing this kind of work? We are so excited, we want to be like you. So it's a thing that's making me happy and want to help them. Yeah.
I couldn't imagine a more dynamic duo than the two of you with the varied experience you have, but also the passion you bring to the job and what you've accomplished already. I think you're amazing role models, and I'm hopeful that via the partnership between Conservation Nation and African People and Wildlife, we can continue to share your stories. I know you'll do that, but I think following the two of you over the next few years would be so interesting. Molly, with that, are we at the witching hour?
I think we have time if you want to have one last wrap-up question, and then we'll sign off.
I do. So, I mean, this is sort of a trick question, but is there a question or a particular point of view that we've not asked you about that you so wanted to share?
Gosh.
I usually do that in a job interview. Like, is there something I should have asked you, but I didn't?
Yeah, I guess one thing for kind of the field that we're in, that I wish I would have known going into it is like, it's not necessarily about what you know, but who you know, which can be really discouraging and frustrating at times. And so one thing that I kind of always try to do is make sure that I can give everyone equal opportunities, because I do know that this is a heavily privileged field. And a lot of times the work you're doing is either not paid, you're volunteering, you have to pay to get this experience. And so I really try my best to be able to offer volunteering opportunities to students that I interact with, just to be able to kind of give them a one up, to be able to put something like this on their resume, because I was fortunate enough to have someone who helped me. And so I think that that's something really important, is just to kind of be persistent, even if it is underpaid or you're paying, it'll pay off, and just kind of follow your dreams and passions, and it'll kind of get you where you need to be.
Sounds good. And Yamat, is there anything I didn't give you an opportunity to say tonight that you'd like to close our session out with?
I think I have talked everything, but the only thing that I wanted to add more is coexistence with the help of technology. It's gonna be possible. And for now, I am here in San Diego, participating in the ESRI conference and learning about the GIS world and learning about how the conservation is done by using GIS is something that is very interesting, and I want to learn more, and also other people to learn more about, because I want to see if Taylor is in Yellowstone doing her work, and I'm in Tanzania doing my work, but what can unite us together to see what everyone is doing is GIS. Yeah. So I wish that I asked Taylor about what kind of program about GIS they do when in their program, and when she comes to Tanzania, I think we'll learn more about GIS and everything. Yeah.
That's great. We'll have a technology follow-up to see what you guys have done in exchange. So this has been fantastic. And I'm going to thank you both for sharing your experience. I'm really sincere in saying I can't wait to follow what you do in your careers and what the next chapters are, and find out what the exchange was like when you went to Tanzania. But thank you, Lynn. Thank you, Molly. Thank you, Katie, Taylor, Yamat, for what was a really fun evening.
Yeah, thank you, Trisha, or Marcia, sorry, for doing this. It was great, and we appreciate you.
Thank you very much.
Okay, and we will send a link to the recording. So thank you all for your attention and participation, and thank you to Conservation Nation for facilitating this wonderful knowledge exchange.
Thank you.
Night, guys. Bye.